point out that the sun shines down its power to all the world and makes the wind blow strong as it will. I wonder how gentle rains can fall upon the land, so lovely earth can stay lovely still.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the 519th edition of Energy Week with George Harvey and the amazing absent Tom Fennell.
In the flesh.
In the flesh.
But not in the studio.
Not in the studio. In the apartment on Elliott Street. Okay. This show, as everybody who watches it regularly knows, is taken from my blog, geoharvey.com, geoharvey.com. You can go there and click on the calendar to hit the date of the show. We will try to keep you apprised of that. There's also, if you're looking at this on a computer, you can scroll down to a couple of links. One is to the blog post that Tom and I use as a script. The other one is a downloadable image of that text file, and you can find things out from that. And
well, some of these links are very worthwhile pursuing if you've got the time. Some of them are long.
Yeah, Tom, you sound rather quiet. You want to talk a little louder?
Boy, if the phone's right next to my mouth, I don't know.
Oh, okay. You suppose the phone is having trouble?
Not that I know of. It doesn't do that. It just stops working.
Well, it did last week. It stopped working. But you don't sound quite as loud as you did a minute ago. But we'll brave it, okay?
Well, can't dance.
Okay. Our first item is from DW, which means Deutsche Welle.
Deutsche Welle.
Deutsche Welle, which means German wave. I'm going to put the image up. And you have a title.
Cabin with solar panels.
That's the title for the image, Tom.
And it's interesting that it's interesting. It's interesting that the cabin is made out of stone.
Well, you know, you talk
didn't
about
have any trees.
Yeah, you talk about how fun it is to see a thatched cabin in Africa or someplace like that with solar panel on the roof.
Yeah,
and when I saw this cabin, you know, way up in the mountains, it's obviously way up in the mountains, with no trees around and shrubs and grass, and that's about it. And it's a stone cabin with its own solar array.
Interesting.
And I just thought, that is so lovely. What an image. Anyway, What do you have for a title for the article?
Wind and solar now generate 12% of global electricity.
Yes, an Ember report found that wind and solar energy hit a record high of 12% of global electricity generation in 2022. Meanwhile, the European Union countries are lagging behind with wind power expansion. Put together, all renewable energy sources and nuclear power make up 39% of global electricity last year. And by the way,
why the EU is lagging?
I don't know, but I was disturbed by an article that came up today. We will talk about it next week, which says that the Russians have put a fleet of ships to sea, which are evidently spying on where the submarine electric lines are in the Baltic. And the purpose of that, of course, would be to conduct sabotage on them if they decided to take power away from Europe.
You know, strange things are happening over there.
Yeah, there are very, very bad things going on. Should we move to the next article?
Can't dance.
Okay.
Nice pictures of coffee.
Yeah, this is not a real bag of coffee. I think this is just a bag of coffee that got filled with beans so that we could have a picture. I think a real bag of coffee beans would probably be quite a bit bigger than that. Anyway, this is from BBC.
The bean that could change the taste of coffee.
Yeah, findings...
It's from Tina Gina.
Yeah. Findings from his latest study suggest that a global temperature rise of 2 degrees Celsius countries supplying a quarter of the world's Arabica will suffer major declines in yield. A rise of 2.5 degrees Celsius will have this impact on 75% of the supply. I'm having a little trouble reading here because I haven't got this to, I'm reading on the computer at 100%, and I usually do it at, there we go. The industry is now pinning its hopes on different coffee species.
Yeah, that's interesting.
It is, and of course the species that they chose because of its good flavor. So they're talking about having coffee that is going to be plentiful in the future, but doesn't taste quite as good.
Oh.
Yeah, it's kind of sad, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So are we going to go on from there, or do you have more about that?
No, I really don't. I mean, it's interesting that there's major declines in yield.
Oh, yeah. Major.
Interesting.
Yeah. Okay,
That's because of warmer temperatures.
Yes. Well, the coffee beans require cool temperatures during part of their growth cycle in order to produce properly.
Okay.
Yeah.
That explains that.
Yes. Our next item is from Mining Weekly.
Oh, we get a nice picture of a coal-burning power plant.
We do indeed.
That picture is not burning anything.
Yeah, it's not burning anything. And if you had shown me that plant, I'm not sure that I would have guessed that it was coal. I don't see any of the conveyor belts that go up at angles at coal plants.
Yes, I agree with you. It's got an awful tall stack, though.
It does, and yeah. Anyway, it was advertised at Pixie.org as being a coal-burning power plant, and of course, the people who put these things up, Pixie.org has public domain pictures, and a lot of them are nice pictures, but I'm not sure that they're all identified properly. So this might not actually be a coal-burning power plant anyway.
They're not always what they say they are.
That's right. What do you have for a title for the article?
Coal supplying less U.S. power than gas, renewables, and nuclear.
Yeah, this is a big tumble from the top, isn't it? Coal use in the United States power market is set to decline for a second year in succession as utilities increasingly shift to cheaper and cleaner natural gas and renewables. About 11...
It's the economics, stupid.
Yeah, about 11 gigawatts of coal plants, which is 5% of the U.S. fuel's capacity, closed in the last year, according to the Department of Energy.
Well, they're not making economic sense anymore.
Yeah, but 11 gigawatts is a lot.
Gigawatts is bigawatts, baby.
I think I've heard that before. Okay, I'm going to go to the next item.
On Friday, April the 14th?
I think that's right. By golly, you're right.
The wonderful picture of transmission lines.
Yeah, I'm going to put that up so people can see it. There we go. Transmission lines. I would be interesting to know where that is. That could be in Vermont.
It could be.
Yeah. This is from Reuters Events. U.S.
needs power highways from the plains to spread wind and solar benefits.
Right. As the Biden administration takes measures to accelerate renewable energy deployment, the U.S. Department of Energy released a national draft transmission study that highlights the importance of new transmission capacity to achieve emissions goals and reduce costs.
Well, if they generate the electricity, then they got to have transmission lines to get them somewhere.
Well, they do, but Tom, I really think that this focus on transmission lines ultimately is not going to be all that useful. I think the thing to do is to put the power generation as close as possible to where it's actually used.
Well, I think it's happening.
Yeah. Having it close would mean that you'd have a more reliable system. I mean, if in Vermont our electricity comes from, say, Iowa, we could have all the wind power we'd want, but there's a lot of space for things to go wrong in between here and Iowa.
Yeah?
Yeah. So if we had it all within 100 miles, you'd have only a tenth of the distance for things to go wrong that you'd have if it's within 1,000 miles.
Well, we are that way, so more or less.
Yeah.
We get most of our power statewide, anyhow, from Canada.
Yes, that's true. And we actually get some of our power from Seabrook nuclear power plant.
A little bit.
A little bit.
Absolutely.
Are you done now with that? You've kicked that article about a bit?
I think so.
Okay. Our next picture is a picture of a smoke after a dairy barn blew up.
Smoke from the dairy farm is what it says.
That's what it is. And this is from BBC.
The title is that a Texas dairy farm explosion kills 18,000 cows.
Just imagine
Wow.
a barn that had 18,000 cows in it. That's incredible.
It is.
Yeah, a blast at
Barn.
what?
It was a big barn.
It was a big barn. A blast at a Texas dairy farm earlier this week killed approximately 18,000 cows, according to local authorities. The explosion at South Fork Dairy near the town of Dimmitt, Texas, also left one person in critical condition. Authorities believe that machinery in the facility may have ignited methane gas. Now, I think
that black smoke does not look like a methane gas explosion.
no, it's not. The methane gas explosion set off a fire.
Okay, so that's from the fire. So what's burning there is things like wood.
Yeah, that's right. But I think you can see at the base of that smoke, there's a bunch of little tiny buildings. That's not a railroad set, folks. That's actual buildings. So anyway, the reason why this is here is because it illustrates several things that have to do with energy and climate change. One of which is the danger of methane. Methane is dangerous stuff. Yeah. Another one is the thing of bovine flatulence, which is cow burps. And
it's other things than burps.
Well, yeah, but it's mostly burps. It's you know, I spent a little time around cattle when I was a kid, and they burp. They are impressive burpers. The thing is, a dairy barn has got to be very well ventilated. And I remember when I was a kid, saying, "Wait a minute, there's cracks between the siding." And an old farmer says, "Yeah, you gotta ventilate these buildings, because you don't want those." And the cows, you've got a windbreak so the cows don't get too cold, but you've got to let the air go through, because it's really important to make sure that anyway, this is what happens if you don't get it right. So there it is.
Interesting. Very interesting.
Okay. Our next item, if you're ready for it.
The one with a picture of a battery?
It's the one with a picture of a battery.
Well, it says, and I quote, "New battery center launches in the USA."
Yeah. The United States Department of Energy's SLAC, National Accelerator Laboratory, and Stanford University. I love the titles they have here. They just go on and on and on. Anyway, that bunch has announced the launch of a new joint battery center. It will bring together the resources and expertise of a national lab, university, and Silicon Valley to accelerate the deployment of energy storage. They're serious about this.
Storage has come of age.
Yeah, it has. Absolutely, it has.
I've said this before. In the 4 years of college, I don't think we spent more than 47 minutes talking about storage.
I looked into your curriculum, and you're wrong, Tom. It was more than 47 minutes.
48.
Yeah, I knew you were going to guess. That's what it was. Anyway, that's what it was. Well, people didn't have any reason to worry about batteries 60 years ago. they knew all about batteries. They knew everything there was to know about batteries. At least that's what some people thought.
Well, that was basically that was true then.
It was. You know, there was no research going into batteries in those days. There wasn't any reason to. It was completely different. And it does remind me of how little people knew about batteries even at that time, because I think I've told you about I think it's called the Clarendon pile. The battery somebody put together in the 1820s, and they had it ringing a bell, and the bell's been ringing ever since.
Yes, I've read about that.
Yeah, it's a fascinating thing. There's a lot to in batteries, but you know, the amount of research and development that's gone into batteries in the last 10 years, and you've said this before, is probably more than ever went on before that.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
You know, the ancient Greeks could store electricity. Did you know that?
Oh, it doesn't surprise me. How did they do that?
By holding a piece of amber and shuffling their leather shoes on a fluffy carpet.
Okay.
And then making sparks. Okay, we have a picture now of a nuclear power plant, and this is the Isar power plant in Germany.
Well, that's the cooling tower, but what's that tall stack?
Sure. You know, there's two of them. They have those stacks, I believe, to push any gases that are released much, much higher above the building, so they won't settle in the neighborhood. And honestly, I've seen that at a bunch of nuclear power plants, and I'm just making a guess that it's a safety mechanism, but I honestly don't know what it is. It's just a guess.
Let me give you the title here.
Okay.
A new era. Germany quits nuclear power, closing its final 3 plants.
Yeah. Germany. What?
Interesting.
Yeah, this is from CNN, though they'd been planning this for a long time. Germany's last 3 nuclear plants are closing as of April 15th. Well, April 15th has come and gone, and when it came, those plants were closed by the time it was gone. Marking the end of the country's 60-year nuclear era, German opposition to nuclear power had already been strong in the year 2000, when the government promised a phase-out, but the phase-out began in earnest when the Fukushima disaster happened.
Yeah.
And
woke everybody up.
Yeah, it did. And there are still people in Germany who are demanding that those plants be turned back on because of high power prices, which, by the way, have gone down to normal levels now. And you know, they want nuclear power, and the people who are making that demand don't realize that the uranium in the core of those plants was used 3 months past the date that it was expected not to be used anymore, and it's completely worn down, and they'd have to buy new uranium to put into those plants to get them going again. And the purchase time
make economic sense.
Yeah, the purchase of that would take a year. So there's no way these plants are going to be brought back on in the next year. And in fact,
sound like it makes sense to me.
Yeah, and they'll probably never be back in business. Okay.
Oh, we got a nice picture of some wonderful, funny-looking things.
I think they're, I don't know, noisemakers? Party noisemakers?
Could be.
Okay, this is from the BBC.
The clean energy milestone the world is set to pass in 2023.
Yes. Greenhouse gas emissions from the power sector, the largest source of the world's emissions, are expected to fall for the first time, according to the London-based think tank, Ember. The world's demand for electricity is still growing, but new renewable energy is growing faster.
Money talks.
Yeah, money talks. And here, I'm going to put this up so people can see this set of wind turbines, you know, just to look at it. So, you got more to say about that?
No, let's move on.
Okay, we have a nice picture of some friends of yours.
It looks like grazing sheep.
It does. Are they friends of yours?
Some of them are.
Yeah, that one guy lying down in the middle, I never liked him. This is from the BBC too.
The wool that could capture carbon. This is going to need some explanation.
Yeah, and I'll tell you something. There are things about this that I don't understand. Sheep Inc., that is Sheep Inc., Incorporated, claims to be the world's first, quote, carbon negative, end quote, fashion brand. Whoa. The brand. What's that?
Clothing.
Yeah. The brand, which is based in London, factors farming, including methane, sheep farming's main source of emissions, manufacturing, packaging, and transport into its analysis, according to a report from Carbon Footprint. Now, what's happening here is they're just getting wool from sheep and being very careful about the sheep, what the sheep eat, where the sheep live, how they are shearing the sheep, what they're doing to clean the wool, making clothing, all of that stuff, all the way up to the point where the wool that they're selling as clothing is sold. And they're trying to make every step of that way as efficient in terms of carbon emissions as possible. And they're saying it's carbon negative. Well, why is it carbon negative?
Add all those things up and you get a negative number.
That's right. And the thing, they're saying that this sequesters carbon. And that's true if they've got their numbers right, because the sheep are getting their carbon from grass, which gets its carbon from the atmosphere. And so the carbon from that grass is going into wool, which is not going to be degraded in the near future into anything that would release carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. So it's actually sequestering carbon. You could do the same things making furniture, but they're doing it with sheep.
They're doing it with sheep.
Okay, we're up to Sunday, April 16th.
Oh, we got an interesting picture here. It's the levelized cost of energy comparisons. You want to cover that or
Yes.
cover it briefly?
Well, let's do the article first. This is from Clean Technical, and then I will say whatever I think needs to be said, or you can.
Wind and solar power, now the clear champions on cost.
Right. There are some questions about whether the ambitious goals of the Biden administration to promote EV adoption will succeed, but there is no question that renewable energy, such as wind and solar, is taking over from thermal generation, and thermal generation includes coal, natural gas, and nuclear, when it comes to making electricity. Now, this particular graph, and I'm very sorry that it's a little fuzzy, because I looked all over the place for a copy of this that was clearer, but it had just come out. So there were not a lot of copies of it around. But this tells you the levelized cost of energy, which is the cost of the energy with everything thrown in. And that means that
lifetime
subsidies and incentives and things like that are in here. And by the way, not all of them are, because for nuclear power, which is on this chart, the potential cost of Price-Anderson is not included, and the cost of dealing with the waste, high-level waste, is not, actually all waste is not included.
That's a significant cost.
Oh yeah, and so you're looking at the general range of the costs of various types of electricity. The top one is a little bit deceptive, and I don't mean that that's intentional deception. It's just you have to take it in a context, understanding things, because most of these bars,
the biggest one.
Yeah, most of these bars are talk about the wholesale price of electricity. That top one, though, really is the cost of rooftop solar panels, and so it shouldn't be compared to the wholesale price. It should be compared to the retail price.
Exactly.
The next one down also maybe it would be a good idea to think of comparing that to a retail price. The third one is utility scale solar, and the fourth is solar plus storage. And I want to point out here that NextEra Energy has numbers on solar plus storage that are significantly lower than Lazard's LCOE figures. Now, NextEra Energy is looking at future costs for this, which means an average over the next 10 years. Lazard is looking at what it actually did cost last year. Geothermal is that light bar, kind of a little bit above the middle. Wind, with and without storage, are the next two. And you'll notice that, and then below that is wind, offshore wind. Now, basically what happens here is that the cost of nuclear power, you can see if you compare it with utility scale wind with storage and solar plus storage, that utility scale, which is the third one from the bottom, the nuclear rather, third one from the bottom, is according to this graph, always higher cost than solar with storage or wind with storage. And you know, the interesting thing about that is solar plus storage and wind plus storage are both more reliable than nuclear. More reliable.
More reliable than nuclear.
Yeah.
It's a very interesting statement.
Nuclear plants have to be taken down to be refueled, and it takes weeks to do that.
It's a long time, right?
Yeah. Those solar and wind plants, yeah, maybe they're off for a day or two, but they're going to be back on. The wind is always blowing somewhere. The sun is always shining during the daytime somewhere, and you know, this is a regular thing. You can count on it. And when you put in addition to that, hydropower and geothermal power and wave power and so forth, you're getting to a point where renewable energy is the most reliable in terms of its availability of any energy source we've got. It produces the highest, what?
Does it make sense to burn things?
That's right. It produces the highest quality electricity because unlike nuclear, coal and natural gas, combined cycle natural gas,
nothing to throw away.
There's no reason to have peaker plants and load following plants. So these plants, you know, nuclear and gas and coal, all require much more expensive electricity to back them up. And when you have solar and wind,
more expensive too.
Huh?
Which is much more expensive.
It's much more expensive, and it's not as good power because it takes 10 or 15 minutes to get the match to demand. So they have to fiddle with things, you know, slowing the clocks down in order to get them demand matched. And if you've got a battery, the demand can be matched in a microsecond. So, you know, we're in a new era here. Okay.
Well, as the article says, renewable energy, wind and solar, is taking over from thermal generation.
That's right. That is what it is. So that was from Clean Technica. Should we go on to the next picture?
Can't ask. What is this picture?
The next picture, it's a picture of gas valves.
That's what it says it is.
It is. I was surprised when I came across this. This was another of the pictures from Pixie.org. This is a public domain picture because there aren't really a lot of free pictures of gas valves, but this is a place that you know, and
the picture about 17 pages.
Oh, this is from Oil Change International, and you spent all day reading it, didn't you?
I certainly did.
What do you got?
Ministers falsely claim they have ended fossil fuel finance. Leave the door open to gas investments.
Yeah, it's sad. It is sad. You know, do they want their grandchildren to have comfortable lives? Really? And get away with this kind of shenanigans? G7 climate, energy, and environment ministers issued a communique ahead of next month's G7 Leaders Summit that leaves the door open for investments in new capacity and technologies despite International Energy Agency climate analysis, and that climate analysis says we got to stop investing in this stuff if we're going to survive.
They're playing games.
They're playing games that are very foolish, very, I think, antagonistic to the idea of human survival, but they are deemed necessary by people who want lots of money in the meantime.
Yep, I think that's what's going on.
Yeah. You know, when things go bad, if they go bad, they're already going bad. But when things get to the point where people are desperate, I'm probably going to be long gone. I'm 76 years old. I don't expect to be 100. But I've got a 3-year-old Greek grandson.
Greek?
Great grandson.
Oh.
He's not Greek.
I just wondered how that happened.
No, I know. He's not Greek. But I've got a 3.5-year-old great grandson, and in 25 years, he's going to be 28. He's going to want to have children of his own.
Absolutely.
And what kind of world are they going to be in? So I'm really disappointed. By the way, this next picture, are we ready to go to the next
Yeah,
article?
we got a nice picture coming up of a pond and mill in Harrisville.
Have you ever been in Harrisville?
Probably, but I didn't know it.
I have been.
It's just east of Keene.
It's east of Keene, and it's I've traveled on 119 from, you know, if you're going to go to a bunch of places east of here, Concord, New Hampshire, or actually Concord, Massachusetts, because it's the same road that you could take the same to either Manchester, New Hampshire, Boston.
The picture looks familiar, but looking at it from the other side, the road is on the other side.
That's right. And I think that if you saw this picture from the other side, these buildings from the other side, you might recognize it as a place you've been.
I think so.
Harrisville is a nice town. It really is. So this is from New Hampshire Public Radio.
Harrisville files complaint against Eversource over community power.
Right.
Huh?
Harrisville, New Hampshire is starting community power program. The town has filed a complaint at the Public Utilities Commission. They're bringing this complaint before the commission, so it's not a lawsuit, it's a complaint against Eversource, saying the utility company has violated disclosure requirements in the state's community power law.
Whatever the heck that means.
It reminds me of a saying that somebody I knew in college used to say, "Caution, prosecutors will be violated." What is?
I'm looking at that picture, and the more I look at it, the more familiar it gets to me.
Yeah, I know.
I've definitely been there.
Yeah, it's there's certain places in New Hampshire that everybody goes sooner or later during their lives. If you have never left Des Moines, you should recognize this place. Oh, Tom, I'm having so much fun writing another novella.
Uh-huh.
And the hero is a Pawnee man who, at the age of 18, is in 1858 is going from his village in Nebraska, which is at where Omaha is today, to Cambridge, Massachusetts, because he's going to go to Harvard. And he goes through Chicago at a time when everybody the city is jacking up, is raising its roads and jacking up other buildings.
You mentioned that.
And they had entire city blocks of masonry buildings up on jacks, and people were actually doing business, staying at hotels and stuff that were up on blocks, and they would get up in the morning and the hotel would be a couple of inches higher than it was when they went to bed at night.
Very interesting.
Yeah. And the best way to get from New York City to Boston in those days was by the Fall River line, which meant that you were not going to go by railroad because there was no direct route from New York City to Boston. You would go by steamship from New York City to Fall River, and then you'd have breakfast at Fall River. The steamship would leave in the early evening or the late afternoon and then arrive in the really early morning at Fall River. Have breakfast, get on a train, and go to Boston, and you arrive at 8:30 in the morning in Boston. So things have changed, but everybody, including that young man, should recognize this picture. Oh well. Okay, we're up to Monday, April 17th, and we have a picture of what looks like...
It's a picture of a meeting.
It's a picture of a meeting. It looks like a picture of a banquet or something, but except for all the televisions all over the place. What do you have? This is from PV Magazine Australia, and you have a title of the
G7 targets a terawatt of solar to speed up renewable energy transition. Well, a terawatt is 1,000 gigawatts.
And a gigawatt?
And a gigawatt is a megawatt.
Yeah, and which is made, by the way, of 1,000 megawatts. So a terawatt is 1,000,000 megawatts.
Yeah.
The solar array at the Brattleboro, what was that called? The waste district?
Yeah, up by the dump.
The solar array at the dump is 5 megawatts. And they're saying that we should be installing 100, we should be installing 1,000,000 megawatts. That's 5 megawatts. We should be installing 1,000,000. That's a lot.
5.9, I think.
Yeah. Ministers from the G7 states and representatives of the EU, European Union, wrapped up a meeting in Japan. Why would they meet in Japan? Well, because they like airplanes. With an agreement to ramp up a total amount of solar power generation to more than 1 terawatt by 2030 as part of plans to speed up the clean energy transition. Yeah, none too soon, I'm sorry to say. This is, but a terawatt is 1,000 bigawatts. Right?
Yep. Yep.
So we're set to go on?
Can't dance.
We have a piece from CNN and a picture of a man studying a Monet painting.
Is that a smokestack in the middle of it?
No, that's a tree. And if you don't mind my commenting, I know a little bit about art because I studied art at Pratt Institute. And that man doesn't understand that painting. That's the first thing.
Okay.
Because nobody who is looking at studying Monet would wear a red beret. It would be it would be a different color. The second thing is I was struck by the colors are not the way, but the composition of that painting almost looks like it would have come from Van Gogh. Or what people call people call Van Gogh.
Van Gogh.
Yeah. Anyway, this is from CNN. What do you have for a title?
Scientists confirm long-held theory about what inspired Monet.
This was an interesting story, I thought, and kind of sad. Did you have the same impression?
I'm not well enough versed in art.
All right.
I have an impression.
Let me read the synopsis. Claude Monet was the founder of Impressionism and, in my opinion, a great artist. A team of scientists looked at over 100 works he and an earlier British painter, Joseph Mallard William Turner, did. Turner's paintings are pretty impressive too, but they all seem to be paintings of sinking ships, with a goal of finding whether their paintings capture the increasingly polluted skies of the Industrial Revolution. And in fact, that's what they found.
That's interesting.
The skies that Monet painted got more dim.
Every year.
Yeah, every year. It's really kind of discouraging.
It is very interesting, really.
It is. Anyway, should we go on?
Can't dance.
All right, we have a picture of the Great Salt Lake, which in this picture is titled the Great Salt Mudflat. What do you have to say?
It buys us time, quote, Is it a quote?
Yeah, it's a quote.
It's a quote.
It's okay.
Great Salt Lake is still at a high risk of disappearing, even after epic snow.
Yeah. 3 months ago, nearly 3 dozen scientists and conservationists sounded the alarm that the Great Salt Lake in Utah faced what they called unprecedented danger and required immediate, quote, emergency measures, end quote. Heavy winter bought a little time. So all the snow that we had last week.
Salt Lake is a significantly sized lake.
Oh, it is, yeah. Yeah.
And they're saying it's in danger of disappearing.
In danger of disappearing in the next few years. They were saying 7 years, 4 months ago, and then they had a whole bunch of snow. That buys them a little time, but they've got to figure out how to stop diverting water away from it, because the water that should be going into it isn't. So that's part of why it's drying out.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
So it's not getting refed.
That's right. That's exactly right. And they have this huge problem of how do you water agriculture in the West? How do you supply water to cities?
You use salt water.
You can't use salt water, but you can stop diverting water to cities and farms if you can figure out a better way to provide them with water. And then the water that the Great Salt Lake needs can go into it, and it'll continue to exist.
To replenish it.
Okay, our next item.
They told me the way it is.
Yeah.
That's why they call it Salt Lake.
That's right. Yeah. So we have a picture of wind turbines. And
Get ahead of me here. This is Tuesday, April the 18th. It looks like wind turbines to me.
It sure does. And this is from Renews.
Yes, it is. They got a lot of good stuff.
Yeah, they do.
Goldwinds toasts a 100 gigawatt milestone. 100 gigawatts. Gigawatts is megawatts.
That's right. Goldwind is a Chinese company that makes wind turbines.
Uh-huh.
Goldwind has achieved a milestone of exceeding 100 gigawatts of global installed capacity with successful operation of several wind power projects that just came online. The company held an event to mark the 100 gigawatt installed capacity milestone and the launch of 2 new wind turbine models that are designed for areas with uncertain winds. So that's what that is.
Interesting.
Yeah. More?
Well, you got wind. It makes an awful lot of sense to use it.
It sure does. Yeah, absolutely it does. Now, our next item is from the Australian Renewable Energy Agency.
I had a problem with this, figuring out were they looking at the front or the rear of the car. I decided it's the front.
I think it's the front, yes. I think you're right. Okay, what do you have for a title?
Could electric vehicles reshape the grid?
I think
yeah, they could.
I think they will. The Realizing Electric Vehicle to Grid Services trial in Canberra. Canberra is a city in the Australian Capital Territory. It's the equivalent of Washington in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, Washington, D.C.
Was to find whether a fleet of electric vehicles could provide grid services as big batteries and virtual power plants the same services that they do. The trial is complete now, and the results are promising. Vehicle to grid.
Seems to me that's a sensible thing to do.
Oh, absolutely. Vehicle to grid technology can provide support for the grid. I'm going to put this picture up so people will know, because I didn't quite get it up when I should have. So people can know why it is that Tom and I were wondering whether that's the front of the car or the rear. But I'm pretty sure it's the front.
I think you can see the headlights.
Yeah, you can, and the shape of the hood looks like it's diverting air.
And there's the windshield wiper.
Oh, there's a windshield wiper. Some people have windshield wipers on their back windows. Some people have windshield wipers on their headlights. Can you imagine that?
Yes.
Okay.
Some people have windshield wipers on their cars.
Well, I think that's true. Although I've never figured out the difference between a wiper and a viper, except that I know that the vipers are what they use in Germany. Okay, our next item is from PV Magazine, USA. And I'm going to put this picture. It's a pretty picture, isn't it?
Yeah, it's nice.
Yeah.
Wind turbines under a low sun, it says.
Yeah, I couldn't figure out whether this is the sun coming up or the sun going down. And you know, there isn't a really good word that means either. In twilight comes fairly close, but it really applies to the sun going down. So I don't know, maybe somebody can tell me that there's a good word that means either dawn or sunset. Okay, this is, as I said, it's from PV Magazine USA. Do you have a title for the article?
Since the IRA, $150 billion of investment, 46 factories, and 18,000 jobs in renewable energy.
Amazing. Over the last 8 months,
following... So you're really what the IRA is.
Well, it's the Inflation Reduction Act. Over the last 8 months following the passage of the Inflation Reduction Act of 2022, over $150 billion of domestic utility-scale clean electric power investments have been announced, according to the American Clean Power Association. It's like they had a 6-month backlog, and all of a sudden they've got a 6-year backlog of new projects. It's just amazing what has happened since this law was passed.
Well, $150 billion worth of investment is not, that ain't hay.
No, if somebody invested $150 billion in me, I'd have it all spent tomorrow. You can do that if you know how.
I bet.
Yeah. Well, the stock exchange might benefit from that, but nevertheless, I doubt that I would. Okay, our next item is from CNN, and we are up to our last day.
Up to the end, yeah. This is the last day page of the week.
Wednesday, April 19th, and we have for this day a picture of nasty pollution.
It's polluted air. Now, it baffles me how some of the higher levels the wind is blowing to the west.
I know, isn't that lovely?
The lower levels the wind is blowing to the east.
Yeah. It reminds me of when I was in college, we used to get together at dawn. I started working starting at midnight. I'd do my homework starting at midnight. I loved working in the night when the dormitory was quiet.
Else was asleep.
And I had a bunch of friends who discovered what I was doing, and they all tried it. And pretty soon we were in a thing where we would get together and have coffee as the sun was coming up.
I'll be darned.
And I remember going out on the balcony of my room in the dormitory. We had a balcony, and seeing a bunch of clouds that were all going south, and closer to me was a little cloud that was going north.
Confusing, eh?
Yeah, it is. Okay, this is from CNN.
But it's a picture of polluted air. That's what it says. And it also says, and I quote, "A quarter of Americans live with polluted air.
Yeah.
People of color and those in western states are disproportionately affected."
Right. About 1 in 4 people in the United States breathe polluted air that can hurt their health and shorten their lives, a report from the American Lung Association says. By the way, there were other reports that evaluated the data differently. I mean, by reports, I mean news reports, looking at the same data set, and they talked about a third of the people having polluted air. But the thing about a quarter was that with the quarter, their lives were shortened and their health affected. A quarter of the people in the United States have that problem.
Yeah, that's what it says.
Yeah, people of color are disproportionately affected, as are residents of western cities. Now, not states, cities. The western states, Wyoming has cleaner air outside of cities than Vermont does. Inside the cities, its air is not good. Yeah, and by the way, something or other, studies that I've seen say that somewhere between 250 and 300 people in Vermont die every year early because of air pollution in Vermont.
And you don't think of Vermont having air pollution.
You don't think of Vermont having air pollution, and most of our air pollution comes from cars and trucks and things of that nature. Okay, should we go on?
Move. Well, we can't dance. We got a nice picture of the Capitol building.
We do. We have a picture of the Capitol building, and this is from CNN.
House fails to override Biden's veto of a resolution to overturn the EPA water rule. And we talked about this last week.
Yeah, but if the people watching this aren't confused, then there's something wrong with the way they think. Because this is a confusing title. The House of Representatives has failed to override President Joe Biden's veto of a resolution that would have overturned an EPA water rule. So the rule was there, the House voted to overturn it, Joe Biden vetoed that, and the House failed to override his veto. Republicans argue that the rule puts a burden on the agricultural community by being too restrictive by defining what a navigable waterway is.
But that's what's in effect now.
That's the one in effect now. That is right. And you know, basically, if you think about waterways, if you're going to have a rule about waterways and keeping the waterways clean, you have to extend that rule to the sources for the water for the waterways, or you're not going to keep the waterway clean.
Yeah.
So these people in the House were saying, wait a minute, this is to keep navigable rivers clean, and you're trying to have rules that regard that have effects on ponds and even swamps where nobody's going to be putting steamships onto that swamp. Why do you have to regulate it?
I was going to say there's a big difference between canoes and steamships.
Well, yeah, but you know the other thing is the water in the Mississippi River comes from a whole long list of waterways that are not navigable by big ships. But you have to regulate them in order to keep the Mississippi River clean.
Well, I guess that's what this is all about. They're trying to figure out where to start, where to stop.
That's what they're trying to do.
Do and what not to.
Yep, that's what they're trying to do. Okay.
Certainly, as I say, it's something bigger than canoes, but it isn't necessarily large steamships.
That's right. But it doesn't even have to be canoes. It could be, as I said, it could be a swamp where you couldn't put a canoe. You have to keep it clean if you want to keep the Mississippi River clean.
I'm just talking about a different aspect of it.
Yeah. Okay, our last picture is a picture of a golden lion tamarin. And then we have an article from the BBC.
It's a looking guy, isn't it?
Well,
tamarin is a kind of a monkey, isn't it?
Yeah, sort of. I happen to know what this guy is thinking.
What's he thinking?
He's thinking, what are you people doing?
Yeah, huh?
Yeah, I think that's what it is. This is from the BBC. Have you got a title?
Biodiversity targets may be slipping out of reach.
Yeah.
Not good news.
A study published in the Royal Society journal Proceedings B, and Proceedings B is the title of the journal, and the B is for biology, says effects of climate change and habitat loss on animal populations have been underestimated. Scientists say preventing extinctions may take longer than expected. That is, preventing the extinctions may take longer than expected, and that unless we act now, global diversity targets will be out of reach. Some of them are going to be out of reach, but the things that I remember a number of years ago when I read about animals that might become extinct in North America, and one of them was the American bald eagle. Do we really want that to go extinct? What about the Baltimore oriole? That was another one. These are not threatened species.
I've seen an oriole in a long time.
Yeah,
I have seen some eagles, because there's eagles nesting in the swamp of Brattleboro.
Yeah, okay. Eagles are lovely animals, and you know,
yeah.
when I lived on a mountaintop in New Hampshire, I remember seeing an eagle, watching an eagle come up the road that I lived on, about 10 feet above the power lines, and I could watch it just coming up. It flew straight at me for about a half a mile, a little less, quarter mile, and then when it reached the edge of the meadow that was around our house, it took off and it flew across the meadow to a place where there was a wood road and kind of disappeared. And my son and I watched it as, you know, expecting that it was going to go over a mountain that was over there. And it didn't, we didn't see it. But we did see something else, which was a huge bird flying the opposite direction. And that bird was one of those birds that I always think of as looking like a goose flying backwards.
A goose flying backwards?
That's what it looks like. It's a great blue heron.
Aha.
And it tucks its neck.
That's its legs hanging out.
It has its legs hanging out. And if you get it in the right light, it has a silhouette like a goose, except it's going in the wrong direction. Anyway, we are at the end of our rope, or the end of our time, or the end of our whatever it is. What do you call it?
Well, the word on my screen says fini.
Fini. We're at fini, and we're suggesting that we want everybody in our audience to have an adequately perfect week. So that's what we're...
They stay in Flatbush, wouldn't wait.
Wouldn't wait. Tom is waving goodbye. I happen to know that Tom is waving goodbye.
Absolutely.
And so is his cat's tail.
He's over here next to me.
What?
Keeping me company.
He's keeping you company. Okay. Thanks, Tom. And we'll see you next time, everybody.
Have a good day.
Yeah. Bye.
Adios. You all come back and see us now, you hear?
I knew you were going to get to that.
I forgot to say it.
Okay. Bye-bye.